When asked, I will always claim Impressionism as my favorite artistic movement. From its pioneering of contemporary artistic ideals to the tranquility of its subjects, I will always consider Impressionism as the perfect blend between contemporary and traditional artistic ideals. Within the Impressionist movement, the work of Claude Monet has created the largest impact on my personal fascination. From the expansive series of paintings created in his garden in Giverny to the busy subjects of urban Paris, the work of Monet is diverse yet concise in its continuance of Impressionist ideals. Among his series of works, the Weeping Willow series is the one that stands out the most. Before discussing the prevalence of the series, I will begin by elaborating on the context prior to its creation. Claude Oscar Monet was born on November 14, 1840, in Rue Lafitte, Paris, France. He was encouraged by his father to join the family grocery store business, although his desire to be an artist would eventually trump his father's personal ambitions. Monet entered Le Havre Secondary School of the Arts in 1851. A few years after his enrollment, Monet met fellow artist Eugène Boudin, who became his mentor, and later introduced him to both oil paints and en plein air painting techniques, otherwise known as techniques for painting outdoors. He eventually moved to Paris, where he met many artists who would later play a key role in the development of the Impressionist movement, such artists being Edouard Manet, Pierre-Auguste Renoir, Frederic Bazille, and Alfred Sisley. His networking was put on hold, however, when the Franco-Prussian War ignited, forcing him to take refuge in England in 1870. In the following year, Monet would be rejected by the Royal Academy exhibition, igniting his passion towards the development of the Impressionist movement. He later returned to Paris, where he created one of his most influential works, Impressionism Sunrise, a piece that would be displayed at the Impressionist exhibition in 1874, and would later give the movement its name. Many years later, Monet and his expanding family would rent a house in Giverny, France. As the family slowly expanded their land and cultivated their garden, Monet would find his own home to be the best source of inspiration. Many of his most famous series would take place in his garden, ranging from his most iconic subjects, the water lilies, to the haystacks that would later launch his career. He most enjoyed creating a series of the same subjects, painted at different times of day with different weather conditions, in order to capture the ways a subject could change depending on what aspects of its natural environment changed. After many years of cultivating his art career, Monet died of lung cancer on December 5, 1926. His home and garden were bequeathed to the French Academy of Fine Arts by his heirs. The gardens became open for visitation in 1980, which became a primary source of worldwide tourism to Giverny. Although his later works in Giverny became the most prominent for his personal career, Monet's individual impact can similarly be attributed to his pioneering of the Impressionist movement. The Impressionist movement in itself was a form of rebellion against the Salon, the official art exhibition of the Académie des Beaux-Arts in Paris. Prior to the development of Impressionism, popular artistic ideals revolved around the adherence to traditional subjects and techniques. In consideration with such, the works of many Impressionist painters were rejected due to their unorthodox methods. Instead of waiting for artist society to modernize, the primary founders of Impressionism decided to open their own exhibit, something unheard of in the current art scene. They deemed themselves the Anonymous Society of Painters, Sculptors, and Printmakers, a group of notable names such as Pierre-Auguste Renoir, Paul Cézanne, Edward Degas, Camille Pissarro, Berthe Morisson, and Claude Monet. Similarly to the way Impressionism was a response to the unchanging art scene, Monet created a series of works in response to World War I in 1919. This series was consisted of 10 different paintings of willow trees. However, I will only be focusing on one of them. Within the series of willow trees, Monet intended to convey the sorrow associated with the effects of the war, both on the whole and on him individually. One can assume that Monet was spurred to complete this series due to his personal affiliations with the war, that being his only son being called to arms. He even attested to hearing gunfire from his home, refusing to abandon it as he wanted to share the same fate of his gardens. The pain and loneliness Monet felt due to the war was conveyed through his depiction of the willow trees, a subject many already associate with feeling somber. Through the dark, muted palette and warped, drooping lines of its leaves, the weeping willow Monet painted was one emulative of his feelings of personal defeat. When compared to the lightness of his other works, the darkness of the Weeping Willow series can truly be felt. All of this is primarily achieved through the use of the broken color technique. This technique achieved its popularity during the Impressionist movement, being the primary painting technique used by notable painters. The root of this technique was the idea of blending colors by building up layers directly on the canvas instead of on a palette. This technique is often achieved through pointillism or short brushstrokes, both options utilized throughout the Impressionist movement. In the case of the Weeping Willow series, the downward direction of the willow leaves give an exasperated feeling to the subject. The piece develops an almost slouch-like composition through the ways the brushwork moves throughout the work. An example is the way the strokes run up the trunk of the tree and droop with the leaves. The tree's exasperated pose is what communicates the feeling of defeat Monet was personally feeling. Interestingly, some of the uncharacteristic colors Monet utilized in the series were not directly intended. Around the time of the painting's creation, Monet developed cataracts on his eyes, which affected his vision to the point where all his paintings developed a harsh reddish tone. The Weeping Willow series had its fair share of travel. It was originally bought by Baron Kojiro Matsukata in 1924, a notable Japanese businessman. 20 years later, it was sequestered by the French government, in which it wasn't repossessed until 1960 by David Rockefeller, an American banker. 6 years later, it was purchased by the Kimberly Art Foundation, where it currently resides. Both well known in his personal work and through his historical relevance, Monet continues to be a beacon for artistic ingenuity. With the group of artists he helped cultivate, Claude Monet reshaped our current perceptions of art, allowing for modernity to take hold on a constantly expanding artistic community. Putting his historical significance aside, Monet's work, from his beautiful garden scenes to the depressed, slouching willow trees, will forever inspire and challenge my personal perceptions of art, a notion shared by thousands, similarly inspired by his legacy.